Okay, anybody have any comments, questions before we jump into Karel?
Super curious already.
Take it away, Karel. We wrote a fabulous story about him this month about circularity and his Indeed Innovation Services firm. So take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite curious on the call today, I have to say, because I like it more dynamic, but I can give you a quick introduction to myself, and hopefully then we can have more of a conversation here. First of all, my name is Karel Golta. I'm Swiss-born, Swiss-raised, but eventually wandered off to the United States, where I did my degree for industrial design, like quite a few of you here. I did that actually at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, which was a great opportunity because if you graduated there, you had the chance to also continue to work in the States, which at that time, that was in the mid 90s of the last century, was you were fortunate, let's put it that way. And ever since, the aspect of innovation was quite intriguing to me. For example, in my first real job, I worked for a consumer electronics company called Thomson Consumer Electronics. And my very first job and the very first week was to be on the design team that was designing the very first MP3 player, okay, way before Apple. And in hindsight, everything is you're smarter kind of a thing. It was a disaster. Okay, it was a complete failure. Why? Because we did exactly what we were supposed to do, doing ID design, but we didn't look at everything else. We didn't look at the interaction of how people were actually playing and collecting and distributing music and stuff like that. So anyhow, that was really interesting if you think of working for the pioneer for MP3, but then you realize that someone else is kind of getting it right and making the real money with it, which was at that time afterwards Apple, of course. Anyhow, 25 or 20 something years fast forward, here I am. I live a nice life in Germany, Hamburg. So that's the north part of Germany, and have a wife, 2 kids. One just finished high school, so he's going to look forward to see where he can find his roots. And now let's circle to maybe a quick introduction to Indeed. And I'll do that by moving a few years back, actually. And Tommaso, who is in the call, has been quite substantially on many of the transformational aspects that we have lived through in the past 5 to 6 years. But, about 4 years ago, we were the typical, I call it bad guys. Bad guys in terms of sustainability. Why? Because we were really shooting for innovations that went bigger, bolder, better, further, higher, wider, more money. I mean, unfortunately, not that much money for us, but for our clients. That was, of course, driving, which, if you think of the dMBA, it's also an underlying concept, right? Hey, you do that so you can prove you are worth the money and the concept is worth the economic impact and stuff like that. But it was about 3 years ago, I had a little Oppenheimer moment, wondering if what we were actually doing, if it was adding up to any good, to any real good. Yes, you could call it a midlife crisis, whatever. But the point was, you have to be self-reflective in terms of, hey, is it just you looking in the mirror, or is it also the others that feel the same way? And so we started in end of 2019 to organize a program that we would start in the first week of January 2020 with some peers of the company. Amongst them was also Tommaso, is on this call here, with the help of external people to look into what could our role be in the future. In the future means in about 10 years time and beyond. And that was really important so that we collaboratively looked into what could be the future role of Indeed, of a company with its employees in the future, and how could we do better, different, good. So within a half year, and including all the rest of the company's employees, we developed a new concept of what we want to be. And the important part, and then I'm probably done with the kind of an intro, the important part was that once we realized altogether that what we have been doing so far was really not going to lead to a good end, we committed and said, like, okay, we have now a roadmap on how we have to transform ourselves. And it's not going to be a transformation that we're going to do gradually in terms of, hey, let's do, 80% bad and 20% good, like over the other companies that say, like, let's support the bad stuff by doing 50%, for free or whatever, kind of type of issues. We said, like, hey, if we are doing anything bad, that can't be good, right? And this is when we focused on solely circularity and only on the aspect of sustainability within circularity. Why? Because if you are coming from a design-led company, the topic obviously is you want to create new stuff. But the problem in a world with finite resources is if we create new stuff and don't have the concept how to circle it back, how to deal with the endings of what we create in new, well, then eventually after 100 years, you are in serious trouble. And this is exactly what we are seeing now. So this is where we pivoted and said, like, we have to transform from 100 to 0 and back again to become an innovation services firm solely for the circular economy. And the problem was, of course, we had all these great employees that were all used to do, kind of like myself, the wrong stuff, or the stuff that we thought was good, but it was done in the wrong way. And so we had to go through a massive relearning, unlearning, relearning sessions. And one of these was also the dMBA course, like all of you. And I did mine in summer of 2020. And that was quite fascinating, actually, because it really helped to trigger more aspects, not only on a circularity, because it didn't have a lot or anything about circularity, right? But if you think about it, how you can analyze stuff from a numerical point of view, for example, to then turn it around and give the value proposition a different type of meaning itself. But I don't know, Claire, is that for a beginning? A start. Are there any questions, comments, Tommaso, maybe, some, hey, oh, bullshit, it was completely different.
I think it's great. I mean, we all have had these aha, or you said Oppenheimer moments where you kind of totally second guess or check on what you're doing with your life. But the fact that you did something about it instead of just complain or switch jobs, or like you really changed your entire company's mission, and then, have really been an evangelist for circularity. It's really cool.
I do have a question for Tommaso, actually. So I have also worked in innovation management consultancy, and I imagine my boss of the time coming to me saying, look, what we have done so far is crap. I know that this wasn't the case, but in the end, it was like how you told me was, or how you told us now was, okay, we need to completely change how we do stuff. So how is this for the team? How was it actually presented in a way that you could also identify with it? And how was this change then introduced? Or was it more like, yeah, finally they're coming with this, and finally these guys up there are also realizing this and happy to do it differently? So super curious how it was for the team.
You touched upon like multiple points, so I try to sum up everything. First assumption is that Karel is not just the boss, the owner of the company, but he's also like the visionary. So he's the one who is setting up the trajectory, and people really believe this, and people really follow. That's what we all did, and that's the basic assumption. Otherwise, no transformational company would happen. Second would be that transformation in any company, especially in a firm like Indeed, means a change of mindset. People have to change, people have to adapt their beliefs. And that's really important, because if you're part of a firm like Indeed, you share those beliefs. And that's where Karel was really breaking through. And that's where everybody felt really very much engaged. And that was really crucial. Regarding, we have been doing like bad shit so far. So let's change that one. Oof. France, that was tough, because on one side, and I hope Karel will, it's important to highlight all the fireworks, all the positive things, and all the great successes that we got. On the flip side, it means that there are a lot of like grievances, and there were a lot of very bold decisions that a person who is in charge of a company has to take over, which is also rejecting some projects, clients, and stuff like that. So these are very bold decisions that are the coin that you have to pay in order to make it happen. So that's how we all felt. We felt like there is a vision. We believe in that one. We're going to follow the leader, and we go all in with that one. And then we're seeing how step by step, everyone felt super engaged. Everyone built up a lot of knowledge, and everyone started contributing. Now it's part of the company. Everyone is that thing.
Wow. Impressive.
Hope it answers.
So another topic, change management, but that's not the topic.
Well, and probably we would, I don't know if we would be a good example, but honestly, I think it's an important message in that aspect as well, because and Tommaso, and maybe I start with that one. Tommaso, I would be curious. I mean, I hope, because this was the intention and you were part of the team at the beginning, and then it was rolled out for the entire company. I think the secret sauce to the success was that we got everyone involved, right? It was not just a top-down management decision, and here's a pamphlet, here's a new manifesto, please follow it. It was everyone actually co-created it, right, Tommaso?
Definitely, yes, because Karel mentioned at the beginning of the story that an elite of us started working with him, and that was true. Since day one, we had the first workshop where like 15 people out of a company of 50 employees. And then step by step, we started involving everyone. And through this transformational path, then stage by stage, everyone had a role. And that was coming both sides, because it was not a top-down decision. There was really this way of like, I want to be part of that one. So I want to find my own spot. And that's something that was already part of Indeed culture and mindset. Like the decision about the title, I don't know if you're going to mention about this later, or anyway, everyone has to find their own spot in the company. So all of this was anyway complementary, was part of this transformational change.
Cool. Let's come back to the other topic of the call, which is circular economy and design for sustainability. So either Karel just goes ahead with how it actually worked to like land these projects, what challenges these early projects had, and so on, or any one of you has questions already in this direction.
Yeah, can I jump in? So from what I understood, you're dealing mostly with product design, circular product design, is that right?
Well, we used to do a lot of products, but also always services, and especially, I mean, we always called ourselves an innovation company because we want to allude to concept that that we are just doing, you know, kind of conceptual work. We have engineers with us, mechanical, software, hardware, everything. So we go end to end. But we do right now, today, we're doing a lot of systems design. So circularity, if anything, you know, is and foremost is systems design, to really look at entire product journey, look on how we can, you know, close loops, reduce waste streams that are inherently involved in today's system, things like that, and then design a product that is geared to nudge consumers and users into a certain direction, be it, you know, less energy consumption, whatever it is. So it's service-based, and right now I have to admit more service and systems than it actually is physical products.
So just so I'm clear, when you say systems design, is that systems thinking, or are you designing ecosystems?
It can be both. So we have two things. You have, and I don't know if I'm, you know, too basic or on that, so please bear with me. But you have either, if a product can be designed for sustainability and circularity, for example. Circularity means it's, for example, for our strategies, you can repair it, theoretically refurbish it, you can recycle it if you want to. Most products are recyclable if you want to, but they're not designed inherently for it, and especially the system is not there. So what we try to do with our customers is always, it doesn't help if you make something recyclable if then you don't have a system in the country where the product is being sold that can actually take it back and make it recyclable. So for example, in Germany, the sustainability aspect of we have a yellow bin, just as an example, where you put the recyclable, valuable material in trash, but actually only 5% of it gets a second life, let's put it that way. The rest is being burnt. Okay, 5%. And this is not because the design of the stuff is bad, it's because the system is not designed. And this is where, it is all about the essence of what we learned at the dMBA, because you have to look at, crunching with numbers. So we do a lot of business modeling with numbers so that we can prove, hey, listen, and the numbers don't need to be monetary values, right? They can be values of lost time, of resources lost, of energy lost, of CO2 emissions and other emissions. And this is the aspect where we have to look at systems and then look at Pareto principle, with what little effort can we have the biggest impact actually to make it better.
Do you deal with the upstream and downstream?
Yes, of course. So upstream is, of course, that what we all should be working on. But again, sometimes, you have clients, think of it in any time of a retail environment. Think of your yogurt, just a basic example or so, it needs packaging. I mean, you can't get the stuff in your hands and then carry it home and eat it there. So there you can only work at the beginning on the downstream system, but where we are trying to solve a lot is to change people's mindset for the upstream part. But honestly, that's the hardest. It works with startups, but with established system, then we're back to Franz's change management.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, just building on this, and you talked a little bit about the change internally, but thinking externally, I think you'll probably talk about it, but I'm curious about how much it was working with your existing clients who are prepared for a change, or finding new clients, and maybe here the geography, the sort of foundational systems in place in different regions are a factor, because some, even though they might want to do it, can't do it. So how much was it looking for complete new work, and how much was it sort of adapting and using your reputation and trust with existing clients to help them in that journey?
So it's both, but we knew, and this was the hard decision we really had to make, and it's still hard today, because we said we give our existing clients 4 years time, so until 2024, to transition like we do. So from that point on, we only would take on circular projects from them. New clients from 2020 on, we did not accept unless they were doing circular jobs. And this is obviously, then we knew that as a business model, like anyone probably you have, if you want to sustain, you have to gain new customers, because some of your old customers are going to leave you because maybe client contacts leave and stuff like that. So we had to focus on new stuff, new clients, but we were quite confident, and we proved right, that there are a lot of companies out there that are on the same path as we are, in terms of they realize they need to get circular. And this is the only way to true sustainability, because it doesn't help you if you measure your LCA footprint, right? If you then don't change it, and the change only comes by really changing the system, and not just by substituting materials. And this is again, I mean, this is a challenging part, because it's more difficult to find these fewer. It's a little bit the needle in the haystack, a little bit, but it works. And now I forgot your second question you had with it.
No, that was it. I think it's just understanding how much it was a split. But I think, yeah, these sort of conditions that you set for yourself are really interesting, and looking forward to hearing the rest of the story as you talked about change management.
Right. Maybe what I can add to that is, there are lots of great stories already out there for circular design. Again, one that I love, it's not coming from us, it's from this Dutch company. I'm sure you heard about it. Anyway, I mean, Dutch companies, right, Franz, they're always great, fun move and standards anyway. So also in terms of sustainability. So it's a Dutch company called Gerard Street, and they're building headphones. Okay. And if you haven't seen it or you haven't heard about it, definitely check it out, because in France, that would be a perfect case for your classes, actually, because it's everything at once. It's circularity, it's business model, it's everything. So they basically designed a headphone, and I called it, you never need another headphone in your life. And the truth is, why should you? I mean, we don't need more than one car ever in our life, actually, right? I mean, it's not like bicycle that when you're a young toddler, you need one that fits your size, and then when you're older, you need a new one, right? But there it's designed that every piece can be replaced or eventually repaired, but mostly replaced because of abuse or just the usage of it. And to underline that in terms of behavioral design, it comes flat packed like IKEA, right, to your home. So you have to assemble it. And that brings you already to the first thing. Okay, if the ear cushion is after 3 years, it's worn out, no problem. I know how to disassemble it. If the cable is broken, no problem. If there's a new microphone coming out or new noise canceling technology, you can purchase that part and then upgrade it, your headphones and stuff like that. And all that together, brings really the point that you don't need, I mean, if you have a good headphone, you don't need like the ones from Apple, to buy a new one every 3 years because the battery is broken. And I think that's just smart on that level, direct to consumers in it, all the aspects that we talked about in the course as well.
If no one's got a question, can I jump in with another one? I'm curious, how would you, I've got 2 questions. I'm going to ask the first one first. How would you make the business case? Are you approaching companies to take this on, or are they approaching you? And how would you make the business case, the strategic case, I guess through legislation or whatever, depending on whatever kind of clients you're working with? If it's a finance company, EU taxonomies, etc., would be all relevant. How do you make those cases, and are you including tools like ESG, or are you going straight to circularity and talking about sustainability, or are you easing them in with like stuff like ESG?
Everything you just mentioned. So it's, and by the way, I'll get back to also Roberto about the global scale. I forgot to answer you on that one. So now I remember. So yes, it's everything, Manu, because it really depends on a client side. Some clients, they have in their sustainability report, they have clearly goals for circularity. Okay. That helps. So this is, for example, yes, we have, of course, inbound sales. That's the easy part, but the most difficult part is when you go out to the clients, and we do that a lot, of course, we have to find the needles. And there it depends. So the ESG is very difficult and critical because there is no real framework behind it that has some hard facts, which is a problem overall for circularity, because there's not like the one standard that you could do it. It's not like with LCA where you have the greenhouse gas protocol and stuff like that that you could do. So that makes it a little bit difficult. You have to really make it a little bit to the customers in how to approach it. It could be also GRI aspects. But what we find right now, what helps, because the concept of circularity, unless in the sustainability department, it's really entrenched, it still is not there in the product development, product marketing, product ownership, or R&D department. There it is. Of course, they understand the concept of repairability and design to recycle. That is nothing new in theory, but it has never been demanded by the market or by marketing or product management. And the question is really about the business case there. So again, it's like with the recyclability. Just because something is recyclable doesn't mean that it's going to be recycled. And just because something is made repairable doesn't mean that people will repair it. That concept only really makes sense on a business side if you also change the business model behind it. Okay, because otherwise you're just doing a nice thing. I mean, it's great. I have like, a hand mixer for making cakes and stuff like that is 30-something years old, right? From my grandmother. Great stuff. And luckily it has screws, but the intermediate products being sold, they were not unscrewable. So you could not even fix it, for example. But the money, the company that produced that 30-something years ago doesn't make money off the fact that I can repair it now. So the question is, does it need that to happen? How can you involve that? You know, again, Gerard Street. What I found right now interesting and it seems appealing, and this is a kind of a trick, is the aspect of the CO2 claims, neutrality claims that the companies are making. So most companies will go like, hey, we want to be CO2 neutral by 2030, something like that, right? You've all read about that, correct? And now the fact is that scope 1 and 2 is only the part that usually they go about. And scope 1 and 2 are accounting for about 10 to 20% of the CO2 emissions that a company have. The biggest amount comes from scope 3. And scope 3 emissions are the ones related to your product and to your service. And just here to explain that a little bit more frighteningly, if you are a travel agency, your emissions, scope 3 emissions, that probably accounted for 99% of your emissions, are the flights and hotel rooms that you're selling. Oops, I don't own them. I don't own, you know, Trivago does not own a plane or a hotel, nothing like that. But this is where their accountability is in. And this is the interesting part. And most companies have not yet tapped into that, but this is exactly where circularity plays in. Okay, because this is where on a service, you can also think about circularity and sustainability, but also on a physical product, you know, then suddenly the airplane, you know, aircraft manufacturer has to think about that because he knows that, or they know if they're not complying to that, potentially one of the big, you know, selling platform will exclude them or will say, hey, we're not going to, you know, sell tickets with aircraft XYZ or something like that. It could happen. So this is where all the system plays in its role again. And this is something that we tap in right now because we can show where the correlation is upstream and downstream in terms of circularity and scope 3 emissions.
And the second question I had was, what process are you using or what process are you following? Is there a particular school, or like I've done a lot of research into this. I'm working on figuring out a method for myself, me and a collaborator. And there's Leila Jaralu, she does disrupt design. She has small little sections that are useful, but it's not a coherent system. There's the natural step guys, but that's not accessible to like people who use design thinking because it is very much a systems thinking kind of process, although effective. There are a couple of other people, I think there's the SID in Amsterdam and Climate Kick who use individual tools, but there's no coherent system as far as I've seen, which is a massive problem because like pollution basically comes from industry and industry comes from business, right? So unless we can transform business properly and there's a system for that, then there's not going to be a change, right? So people are looking around, scratching their heads right now. They're ready to change, but there doesn't seem to be a coherent system or enough experts. Like, because I feel like circular and something like the sustainability space is so complicated. There's so many like letters and words and concepts thrown around. So circular only covers part of the journey for me, because like if you add systems thinking into, you add complexity into circular, then you have the problem with you don't have the infrastructure to recycle something. So circular is like good in theory, but it's not good in practice. Or sustainability, people were like, well, it shouldn't just be sustainable. We're not trying to just maintain ourselves. We're trying to get to a level of regenerative design, right? We're trying to actively give back to the planet at that stage. What system are you using right now, and how did you come about it, and how are you finding the process?
Right. So we actually struggled with the same thing. So 2.5 years ago, you know, we were looking and seeing like, wow, there's a lot, but it's all islands or siloed things, bits and pieces. And this is what, and Tommaso can sing a song about that, right? I mean, we and it's not finished. Since 2.5 years, we're collecting, bridging, combining tools together and things like that, creating new tools because we realize, oops, we should do that, but there is nothing out there. So we have a massive collection of different tools and started up to do a huge framework. We call it Blueprint internally, for all the different stages, and it's a massive framework, I have to say. And we still don't know. I mean, this is occupying a lot of time actually of ours, and we don't know if ever we will use the entire system. So with every new project, we're trying to pitch in and test things and make sure it works. And it starts to get better on certain type of projects where we can combine the system thinking aspect with a more of a design narrative aspect, for example. And I told Franz about and Claire about that we, for example, combined business model canvas was numbers, because we thought that the business model canvas was always lacking numbers behind it, real numbers that you could play through and amend, and so like dynamically, what if you change that part of the business model canvas, which is a system, how does it impact the other aspects? For example, another tool we developed ourselves was a design LCA, because the problem is LCAs, I mean, lifecycle assessment tools, right? Especially the rigorous one, they're all about math, so super complicated and stuff like that. And companies only do it at the end of a development cycle. So then they know the impact of their product, but then it's too late, right? Because 80% of all the emissions are being determined in the design phase. So this is when we then designed, it's a quite cumbersome, I have to say, working on it to make it more beautiful and more user-friendly, but it's a cumbersome Excel sheet, but so minimal design that we can use it in a very sketchy first phase of a design exploration, for example, and assess whether concept A, B, or C is more sustainable. And this is important. And I think this is the message to any designers, this is where it totally relates to, for me, to the dMBA, that you don't just do a design because you like it or a concept for a service, but you actually do first numbers, and then you base your model iteratively on these numbers that you reevaluate and continuously, kind of grow confidence in the quality of the numbers. And this is where it so beautifully comes together. And we have to do that, because otherwise, we don't need any designers anymore on this planet if they don't do it totally differently than we used to do it. Sorry for this harsh.
Not at all. So let me recommend this. It's called Design Journeys Through Complex Systems. Peter Jones from OCAD, who's like an OG, super OG, him and Crystal Vanel, they'll put together a system which is systemic design. It's not exactly systems design, because that's a different thing, but systemic design is a combination of design thinking and systems thinking, and it's got all of the tools. It's like literally a step-by-step process. If you go to the systemic design toolkit, you can download the canvases. And what I found is, because I've been working on the same process, is fitting a lot of the tools into those processes that already exist are really interesting. He's got an interesting take on the double diamond, which has 7 steps and stuff. So it's a really interesting framework to look into and slot elements into. Okay, so I know I'm hijacking the conversation. This is the dMBA, right? Everyone here is a designer. Everyone here is like a business-minded designer. They've all done the course, right? So I feel like we're in a position right now where if you can marry the sustainable element with the design element and the business element, that's going to be a new profession that is necessary, right? So a strategic sustainable designer is what I'm thinking it will be what it looked like. But I don't think that any people aren't familiar enough with it, because they're so different. They're all islands by themselves, and they're all quite complex. So unless you can understand systems thinking, design thinking is not good enough, right? So in this book, and there's a couple of other people, there's 4 elements of design. There's 4 layers of design. There's design 1, which is basically communication and visuals. Design 2, which is more service design and product design. Design 3, which is more systems thinking and the whole business, and design 4 is like societal wicked problems, that kind of stuff. So if we're operating at design 2 right now, and we need to be operating as a design 3 and design 4, like you said, with the systemic design, with the systems thinking and that element, but you need to be able to zoom in and zoom out, I feel. because you are designing products, you are designing services as well. So you need both of those. But systems thinkers don't understand service design, and service design don't understand systems thinking. And then on top of that, none of them understand business. And then on top of that, none of them understand sustainability. So it's like a massive problem that I see. And yeah, I guess people in this room are going to be the ones.
Right. And if I may ask, Mani, add on that, actually, one aspect, if you say, you know, we need a new type of designer, I think one aspect that comes in that also has been not focused maybe enough, a little bit like the business side of design, is the psychology of people. I mean, yes, we have, because we looked at ergonomics, right? I mean, if you think of Brightfus and stuff like that, you know, human factors and things like that, no question. But what we didn't do is the psychic. We only looked at a bodily implementation of it. But we need to use behavioral science to actually change people. And I give you, if I may, you know, I give you a nice example that has less to do with circularity, but shows that this aspect, if you would have, you know, 3 or 4 circles that overlap, is if you think when you book a flight, right, somewhere at before checkout, there is a small little checkbox that asks you, hey, do you want to offset the flight, right? And then it, of course, next to it is written, hey, that costs you like $7 or something like that, right? It's actually hilarious, because this is so flawed into terms of experience design, because you know that whenever you at the cash register ask for any complication, additional step for the user to do, that usually causes them not to do it. Why? Because it's exactly at the point where his need and psychology is, I want to finish that up. I purchased what I actually want. This is my job to be done, is to book this flight. Now you come with an additional question that I do not know how I should deal with. And especially it has to do with conscious thing. So, is that, do I need, not, nobody's checking it, you know, kind of a thing. It would be so much better. And this is the experience we have to design as service designers, or anyway, business designers as well, is actually to eliminate that. There should not even be an option for that, because inherently consumers and users, they want to live their most sustainable life possible. Nobody wants to kill animals and burn down trees and things like, nobody wants to. But our industry is telling them, hey, you can do the bad, which is, you know, cheaper, or hey, the better or good, but sorry, that comes at a price. I mean, how fucked up is that system, right? It's as if you could, you know, slap your brother or your sister or something like that. It's like, no, you're not allowed to do that, never. You know, kind of thing. So why should we even propose having bad things? And there's a really interesting research, although I don't have to look, but I think it's from A.T. Kearney. They did that on for example, the Kraft food. They have the macaroni and cheese in the States, right? You all know that. And they changed their ingredient structure from being all artificial to completely only natural. And they never communicated that. Why? Because they were afraid that if they would communicate it, people would go berserk about it and go like, no, I want to have my old taste. But they did it because of purpose. They said, we need to do better and not to make a marketing thing out of it. And this is the thinking as a business owner and I think business designer. This is where we have to go to. And that means we have to also deal with and lure in people, like not telling them that the recipe is new.
I'm going to shut up now, so let someone else talk.
No, you don't need to shut up. You ask great questions. And I thank you for the book recommendation. And I like that the passion you bring to this, Karel. And I also like, Mani, that you said there's going to be a new position, strategic sustainable designer. And I think you're absolutely right. And I hope it comes to fruition sooner rather than later.
I guess I have a question again around who you work with, and you mentioned your sort of transition and sort of helping people along, and all the complexity around, including all these different aspects, right? Business, design thinking, systems thinking, and behavioral, which is fantastic to hear. But how does policy factor in? Like how does working with not just companies but government bodies or European bodies that have to do with this to catalyze or fertilize the ground so that things can happen? How much of your work is doing that as well? So in a way, not just working with your clients, but kind of participating in discussions that help things move forward.
So I don't have a perfect answer to that. I can only tell you what we have done so far. So or observation with what we've done. So in the States, for example, we have 3 offices in the States, in Europe, and in China. And in the States, for example, because there's not a lot of subsidies for any circularity topics, it actually is much stronger implemented in the companies because they realize they just ought to do it. You know, it's also, it has to do with supply, you know, that they're running out of it. And if they don't bring it back or loop it or something, they're screwed, okay? And also consumer demand. So there we see, for example, on a systems level, we're working with consortia that do across an entire industry try to collaborate together. This is a typical, I think, US mentality, because if the state is not, has not that much power in comparison to Europe, we really have to say it, then they are organizing themselves. In Europe, since everything is state organized, I tell you, it's darn difficult, because unless the government is putting up a law, the companies will not really follow. So their intrinsic motivation is rather sloppy, okay? And then you have in China, it's different again, because there the government is, it just say, hey, you ought to do it. And it flips every 5 years. So company there are aware that probably the next flip, and they try to anticipate that, the next flip is, I think, in another 3 years or so, then the 5-year plan is over. And then most likely sustainability will be super big on the agenda. So they start already now to be prepared and analyze things and change systems. It's really interesting to observe. So I have to tell you, I think, although Europe has the strongest laws, they're the weakest, because it's so artificially set from above, or not really well. It's more like, hey, I give you money and then you do it a little bit better, please. You know, it needs to be business culture.
And I guess a follow-up on that, I think that's super interesting. I mean, I can see that how the market itself lends itself to change faster in that way. But you mentioned consumer demand as part of it in the US, for example, right? Where are you seeing sectors or companies where there's a particularly strong story that is helping drive things? Aside from sort of falling into sort of electric cars and things like that, but are you seeing certain areas or sectors where there is like enough momentum that can be the driving force to help companies or governments change?
Well, so you have two things in the States. First of all, is fashion, which is a big topic, and this is where it seems there to be easier, and consumers want that, and there are businesses. I don't know if you know about Trove, for example, Trove.co. Fantastic company. You have to check it out. They're basically a B2B second-hand enabling company. Okay, so they help you if you're a Patagonia or whoever you are, you know, as a premium brand in any type of retail, fashion, or stuff like that. They help you to rebuy the stuff from your consumer and resell it again. I mean, come on, how fantastic is that? That's perfect circular. And this is what I'm saying. The fashion industry in the States, that's working quite out well. And anything that has to do with plastic, because they're doing big time plastic bashing, which is unfortunately a little bit stupid, but that's how it is. That's in the States. So I definitely would look into, and I don't know, there was a really cool quote from a guy from REI, the outdoors retailer in the States, and their circularity expert said like that the garages and closets are the extended warehouses of themselves. Okay, this is in Corona time. This is where they can immediately reach out and say, hey, you know, guys, clients, customers, we look for used tents. You know, we would buy them back. You know, and then they have suddenly stock again. You know, and to resell it. You know, they can, whether it's refurbished or whatever. You know, and this is if you think about it, so cool, because it has to do with the inherent concept of doing business, that you say, why do I have to sell it once? You know, if I sell you a car and you're not aware of the value of the single material that is in there, why am I even selling it to you? Just use the mobility service that is there, but don't price it as if it needs to be, you know, calculated for 3 years ownership. This is where things go wrong. If you really calculate it with all the values in it, the stuff would be so much more cheaper to rent. And then people would switch, because they would say, hey, no problem. If I only pay 20, 30, 40 bucks for a car a month, you know, that's a no-brainer. But the problem is that they want to have the money back in 3 years, you know, for the car. But if then the car is being sold, the value depreciation is literally, it's wrong. It's wrong. And this is also a socially conformity problem. I think that we have to get rid of these massive earnings in certain parts, because they break the systems, the same system as if you would abuse CO2 emissions. That was.
Thank you for that. Great example.
Yeah, so it just maybe, if I may, to put that in perspective, these are some radical thoughts I only share with you here, right? I mean, radical, they're not truly radical, but I'm fully aware, and we all should be, we have to go step by step, but we should not be afraid, and we should be courageous, realizing that we have to do massive change to really make it in the end work. But, you know, step by step, we have to get there. What would not lead to any result if we think we only need to do one small step and that's enough.
It almost feels like that there should be some sort of, I guess, like a manifesto or some way of, as a designer, agreeing to some of these things, kind of like what has happened in a way in digital. I mean, not purely, there's still sort of a mix, but people have identified dark patterns in how things are work online digitally. And if you're an experienced enough designer or a sort of conscious designer, a good human, you will not, you'll sort of stand up against those and not do that or highlight them. Even if there's things that can happen to you. But I think in general, the word sustainability and all the complexity behind it and all these different systems, it still feels very opaque, right? So what are the ways in which people can sort of make a commitment and then start to practice it in a way that isn't overwhelming? But yeah, I mean, so wonderful points. I've really enjoyed everything you've shared so far.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Karel? Karel,
Right, one from me, as I left just a few months ago, and then now, I'm obviously curious about like what's next, what's really hot, what else you see now for the future to come. What's the highest challenge to face next, I would say.
That's a good question, and I think the challenge is to really show success, in every bits and pieces that we do. That's the biggest challenge, because you have to make it countable and measurable, and this is what we're trying to do in every new project, and it's going the right direction, but we have to be so much more bolder. And that's just, it's maybe, what, Tommaso, now that I think about, I mean, that's definitely one challenge, but in the end, the challenge is, do we get the right people that really are committed to this, to the end? Because I can completely understand if people say, like, what, I rather want to work 4 days a week or whatever it is, right? I mean, that want to live a nice life, because we have this thing about, hey, I only live once. I want to make, I want to have a nice life. But I feel we are rebels in this thing. And this is how I consider myself. And I know this, it's now our time. And Tommaso, you remember, we said that we agreed all together, we are the last generation that can make it fix. So there's no time for vacation or anything like that. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's really, this is hard. And you have to find people that are so committed to that. And that also after 1 or 2 years of doing that, right, are still sticking to it. So like, for example, with people with you and with anyone leaving, for example, Indeed, I'm always in the hopes that we are spinning off and not a rebel to another company, okay? Because that's probably the fastest way to, avalanche this thing.
It almost sounds like a course or a set of workshops that dMBA could sort of get involved with, because I think that there would be demand. I think people want to, other rebels want to know where to start and how to do it, but the current state of the market and their jobs makes it difficult, right? So you really have to be a rebel, willing to fight and willing to put on the time. But yeah, I think we just need more catalysts for it. Yeah, so I just dropped the idea there for Claire, and I think France is gone, but it'd be cool if the topic continues somehow with dMBA.
Absolutely.
Does anybody else have any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I do. What are your main challenges? Because look, the education side of things and convincing people of things seems to be the biggest problems I keep on coming across. What are the main pain points that you're finding with clients when you're working with certain clients who want to implement, but the rest of the business is not interested?
I want to call it less of a pain point than an opportunity, is the fact that the sustainability departments of most companies have become more funding than ever before and more power to say, which is great. But the problem is, since they were always a lousy arm of the organization because they were never involved into anything. Now they have to suddenly collaborate with all the different entities of a corporation, being R&D, for example, because you can't make circularity if you don't talk to R&D, right? But you also cannot do it if you don't do it with procurement, with sales and marketing. And these departments, they need help. Okay, they need financially even more money. They need even more power, but we see this happening, and this is really a sweet spot and a nice one. So this is, suddenly as a designer, you don't start to talk to the product managers or marketeers or to the R&D team anymore, but you pivot and go like, hey, sustainability department, let's be friend.
Do you also find that people within the sustainability department or people within the corporate social responsibility or ESG departments, they don't have any power, and because they're new roles, they don't know where they fit into everyone else's boat, and because of that, a lot of people are like, no, you're not stepping on my toes, you're not going to step into my silo, and that essentially they are kind of toothless tigers. They don't have any actual power apart from diplomacy and try to like nicely convince people to do what they need them to do.
You know what? It's interesting. It's interesting in terms of that the ESG departments have won quite a lot of power actually, and they have more power in to say than probably people would like. The thing is just, it's only measurements. And this is where I find it difficult. So it's more like assessing and then trying to, this is the state today, trying to, since it's not so, measurable in terms of all it's not certifiable. Let's put it that way. If you look at greenhouse gas protocol and looking at when you offset and stuff like that, you can have gold standard and stuff like that certified. In ESG, you cannot. Okay, you can have people that look at it, but there's no certification in terms of that is standardized. But business leaders will look at that and say like, okay, the goal is that we get this scoring so that we get better access to cash and stuff like that. And this is where you could change things, but at the same time, again, these ESG departments are not working together with the R&D department because they're not saying, hey, we have a really bad scoring here, let's improve that seriously. They only go for the typical stuff like, hey, can we kick out that vendor and take a new one? But that's not really fixing it. Not most of the time, at least.
Yeah, low hanging fruit is a pretty standard way of doing things for people, right?
Exactly, and this is where I feel right now we are still in the times of nudging the numbers to the right thing. It's a lot of greenwashing. There are not yet a lot of corporations that are truly committed to circularity, truly. But the good thing is more and more are getting there to say, hey, let's do some first circularity standards, and that's good. Like the simple thing. Avoid plastic in certain packagings is good anyway, because often people just throw their trash into the landfill trash or incineration trash because they're too lazy to separate the stuff, and they know if I mix this and that together, it's not good. So let me put it somewhere where I don't have to think about it. And this is where we can change small things.
Makes sense. Yeah, actually, let me withhold that question.
Great. There's been some really interesting discussions, and Karel, thank you so much for bringing your passionate insights to this. Is there any other questions before we end? No? Well, thank you so much, everybody, for participating. And thank you, especially to you, Karel, for all of your time and effort this month. And yeah, stay tuned and see the recording uploaded and have a lovely evening. Enjoy the sunshine if you can.
Yes, you all
Thank
too.
you, Carol. Thank you.
So much. Thank everyone.
Bye, Karel. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Tommaso.